I get to drive a lot of great cars, trucks, and SUVs for work, and some happen to be more memorable than others. And then there are the ones that just have that sort of ubiquity about them. You know the ones I'm talking about? They're just sort of there, always part of the conversation. And I've got to be honest, when it comes to luxury SUVs, the Volvo XC60 just isn't one of those names for me. And it's not just a case where I forgot about the XC60, it's that I forgot how incredibly good it is. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Look, it's not like I intentionally forgot about the Volvo XC60. It's just not something that comes to mind when I think of small premium SUVs. It's like trying to remember all 30 MLB franchises. Not even the most die-hard fans are going to be able to recall them all right out of the gates. And that is the case here. I think of vehicles like the Mercedes-Benz GLC class or the BMW X3. Even that new Genesis GV70 arrived with a bang, and it's enough to be at the top of mind. Whereas this one, well, not so much, but I'm very glad I remembered this thing because it is so good. It's really kind of timeless by design, and I mean that both literally and figuratively. You guys know Volvo isn't one for standout styling, but it's looked basically the same for a long time, and the brand's design language works really well with the proportions of this XC60. I think it's awesome, and it's just got subtle hints of aggression. Those rear haunches, as well as those Thor's hammer headlights, very cool, but again, really subtle, especially with a paint color like this one. It doesn't jump out at you, but it's undeniably stylish. You know, in here, it is very simple. Clean lines, there's not much to it, but I do like it a lot. Very simple shapes, but again, stylish. And these seats, they look like they could be designed by Ray and Charles Eames. I really like them. And this one's got a few extras. This is the Inscription trim, so it's got heat and ventilation up front, but this one also has massaging front seats, and they are amazing. Now, one thing I will point out that I'm a little bit bummed about, no butt massage. If you take a look at that Lincoln Corsair I just reviewed last year, that had a full seat massage and it was very nice. This one, it's just a back massage. I know, first world problems, right? But I would like to see a full seat massage instead of just the seat backs. But then again, it is very nice and supportive. On a long drive, I went out the other day, all day long, about 200 kilometers, and it was just super comfortable, lots of adjustability, and that I like. Otherwise, it is a very simple vehicle to interact with, though there is a bit of a learning curve, starting with the controls down here on the console. And you might be thinking, what are you talking about? Well, if you take a look at this gear selector, super cool, this crystal selector. I dig it a lot. It comes in the Inscription trim. But the weird thing is, well, for the pull or push for drive or reverse, it's a double pull or a double push. So too often this week, I've gone to put it in drive, only pulled once and ended up in neutral. Again, yeah, that might be something that you get used to with time, but I find it incredibly frustrating. And then the same goes with the ignition switch. This little knob back here, the location isn't all that intuitive, and neither is the action, because you turn it in the same direction both times in order to turn it on or off. That's a little bit weird to me. And then this infotainment system, well, that's the big new thing for 2022. It's a Google-based infotainment system, very smartphone-like, and it is very easy to use, even for an iPhone guy like me. I dig it a lot. I like the Google Maps integration. The other cool thing is you can pull your map up here or full screen on the instrument cluster, and that is very neat because you can have your directions right there in front of you. I like that a lot. The only bummer, now apparently it's on its way, but as of right now, there is no Apple CarPlay in here. So for an iPhone guy like me, I'm out of luck. Now, I can hook my phone up through Bluetooth, and it works mostly the same way. I've got my contacts, messages, phone calls, even my music. It's just not as streamlined as an all-in-one system like CarPlay, so I'm looking forward to that arriving eventually. As far as footprint goes, the XC60 is about the same size as something like a BMW X3 or a Mercedes GLC class. What does that mean? Well, if you take a look behind the tailgate, there's about 600 liters of cargo room behind the back seats, and that is competitive for the class, and so is the 1,400 liters or so you get when those seats are folded. Overall, it's pretty useful, and this one has optional air suspension. That means if you hit this button here, it'll automatically lower the back end when you're loading stuff up. I really do like that, but there is a problem. If you take a look, the back seats fold in a 60-40 split instead of the 40-20-40 that you get in those German entries. And you might be asking, why am I so upset about that? Well, yeah, you do have this center pass-through, so something like a set of skis can fit, and you still have 4 full-size seats, but it's just not quite as useful as a fully folding center section. Now, the only other noteworthy point when it comes to moving people and stuff with the XC60, these doors, they're not quite as big as the ones you get with something like the GLC class, and they don't open quite as wide either. And that means getting into this footwell is a little bit narrow. Now, there's plenty of space inside once you do. It just might be a bit of an issue if you're planning to use this as your primary family hauler. But on the bright side, the doors do extend all the way to the bottoms of the rocker panels. That goes for all 4 of them. And that means you and the kids aren't going to get your pants dirty every time you climb in and out in the winter. Now, there is a plug-in hybrid version of the XC60, but this is not that. There's a B5 version, and that makes 246 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque, something like that. And then there's this one, it's the B6, so it's got the same engine, but it has more output. It makes 295 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, and that is a ton. Now, the other cool thing, this has twin charging. It's got an electric supercharger and a conventional turbo. So what that means is it uses the supercharger to give you that low-end boost, and then the more efficient but power-dense turbo takes over. And this is very mellow to cruise around in if you're just on your commute up to work or the cottage or wherever you're off to. But if you need a little bit more speed, now Volvo says this thing will do 0 to 100 in about 6 seconds, and that is plenty quick. But I like the fact that it is just so chill otherwise. It's very nice to drive. I like the steering a lot, and a cool thing, you can actually adjust the steering feel right through the infotainment system. So if you like a little bit more weight and resistance, you can add that, but you don't have to if you want something just a little more relaxed and mellow. I personally prefer that extra resistance, but it's cool that you have that customization. Otherwise, there's really nothing here. There are no drive modes to run through or anything like that. No paddle shifters. You can shift manually, but I'll tell you, it's very intelligent. This is a great transmission, 8-speed automatic. It gets the torque down, no problem. This does have standard all-wheel drive no matter which trim you're talking about. And even that, it was very snowy earlier this week when I went on my evaluation drive, but it just shuffled the torque around exactly where it needed to be. No real issues with wheel spin or anything like that. I like the drive a lot, and another reason why is the fact that this one does have optional air suspension. I mentioned it back when I was giving you guys that little tour of the cargo area. It's neat that it lowers the vehicle when you need to load it up, but the other cool thing is it makes it very comfortable. Now, it is on the rigid side, but it's definitely not uncomfortable. You can just feel the unsprung weight of these wheels when you go over some potholes, but overall, it's very smooth and compliant. It really keeps the body under control, even when you're on a winding road like this one. Now, just like the steering, you can firm up the suspension if you want, but I would leave it alone because of how stiff it is in its standard setting. But again, it is cool that you have that ability to customize, and there is an off-road mode, so you can raise the ride height just a bit, and it also lightens the steering to give you a little more maneuverability out on the trail. Not that I think many of you are going to be four-wheeling in your XC60, but again, it's just cool if you're on a rough cottage road or something like that and you need a little bit more capability to get there. The XC60 can do that no problem. The other thing I got to say that's part and parcel with the drive, the build quality is excellent. This thing is very tight. You really feel like you're in this cocoon of luxury. That I very much like. It's super quiet in here. It really does lend to that demeanor of upscale, really luxurious, but again, very unpretentious. Doesn't feel like it's trying to be anything it's not. My only issue with the drive is that, well, officially, it's not all that efficient, right? It's got that standard all-wheel drive, but this mild hybrid version, it's good for a combined 9.9 liters per 100 kilometers combined. That's not that impressive. That's actually worse than most vehicles in this class, aside from the performance ones, obviously. But I do have to say, I've been doing better than that. When I went on my evaluation drive earlier this week, I only burned 8.5 liters per 100 kilometers, so that's impressive. But as we've been shooting today, I'm already up over 9, and that to me is just indicative of what to expect here. And also, don't forget, this thing is going to run on premium grade gas, so that is an added expense. Now, speaking of added expenses, there are quite a few extras tacked on to this one I'm driving that really do help enhance the experience, but they're not cheap. Those massaging seats, the air suspension, that's almost $4 grand alone. And then there are a whole bunch of others like the advanced driver aids here. Now, I would recommend them because they are very good. Lane keep assist, that's standard, blind spot monitoring, all that stuff. But adaptive cruise control, well, that is not standard. It's part of the advanced package. It's something like $3 grand extra, but it is money well spent because it works really well. You've got to keep your hands on the wheel. That is key. Don't forget, you cannot buy a self-driving car at the moment, but this one, well, it does work really well with your hands on the wheel. It'll guide you along, keep you in the center of your lane. I like that a lot. But there are some extras here I would probably skip because this is something like 77 grand before tax. That makes it one of the most expensive non-performance entries in the segment. If you look at the Mercedes GLC 300, the BMW X3, X30i, those are all right around 6 or 7 grand less. Even the Genesis GV70, a comparable trim, is something like 14,000 bucks less. So don't forget that this is expensive, but there are some money-saving tips here. For starters, maybe skip a metallic paint job like this one. It's 900 bucks that you don't necessarily need to spend. And same with these wheels. They're 1,000 bucks, but 20s come standard on the inscription trim anyway. So I would ditch those too. And the same goes with this stereo. It's an 1100 watt, 15 speaker system. It does sound good, but when you're listening to talk radio, it sounds like the hosts are underwater. It's not all that nice, so I'd just stick with the 14 speaker 600 watt system and save yourself another few $1,000s. That would get the price down to something much more manageable, and it makes it a lot more of a competitive product. But there's no denying the value in this thing because you can see and feel it even at this $77,000 price tag. To recap, I like the Volvo XC60's build quality, its overall drivability, and the smooth twin-charged engine. I don't like the controls inside that aren't especially intuitive, the glossy interior trim pieces, or the tight rear doors. There are some other trims in the XC60 lineup that are cool and competitively priced, but this inscription trim really manages to feel special. Skip some of the extras here and you can easily get into one for about the same price as a fully loaded rival. But more importantly, what you're left with might just be the pinnacle of this segment. Yes, the XC60 is so subtly distinguished it's easy to overlook, but doing so means passing up on one of the best SUVs like it.